Our scripture readings this morning come from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 30, verses 18 to 26, and also from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 1, verses 18 to 29. And the prophet Isaiah writes, "Therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all those who wait for him. For a people shall dwell in Zion and Jerusalem. You shall weep no more. He will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. As soon as he hears it, he answers you. And though the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teacher will not hide himself anymore. But your eyes shall see your teacher, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.' When you turn to the right or when you turn to the left, then you will defile your carved idols overlaid with silver and your gold-plated metal images. You will scatter them as unclean things. You will say to them, 'Be gone!' And he will give rain for the seed which you sow the ground, and bread, the produce of the ground, which will be rich and plenteous. And that day your livestock will graze in large pastures. And the oxen and the donkeys that work the ground will eat seasoned fodder, which has been winnowed and shoveled and forked. And on every lofty mountain and every high hill there will be brooks running with water, in the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold as the light of 7 days, in the day when the Lord binds up the brokenness of his people and heals the wounds inflicted by his blow." And from the prophet, from the Apostle Paul, for his first letter to Corinthians, chapter 1, verses 18 to 29. "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, 'I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart.' Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand a sign and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God." This is the final week in our message series, Questions of Life. And one of the big questions that people have been wrestling with throughout life and throughout history is, how do we know God exists? And a number of years ago, when people started to explore outer space, there was the belief that as soon as you left this world and went into the heavens, you'd be able to meet with God, see the face of God. And there was the disappointment that when they went out to the heavens, into outer space, that they did not find God as they expected. And yet the questions of how do we know that God exists still are prevalent on people's minds. It raises the question that if one expectation fails, does that mean that all the expectations are false? One of the arguments for the existence of God is kind of along a cosmological or a first mover. Essentially, is who got the ball rolling first. If we go back in time to the very beginning, people have argued that it is God who is the one who got this all of creation moving. That it is God who brought order to the universe. And as we read from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. And essentially, he brought order to chaos. Now, like every argument, there's always a counter-argument. The problem people see with this one is, who created God? But you have to also ask the question because another argument that is prevalent, not necessarily on the existence of God, but on the existence of creation and of what brought all of the universe into being, is the Big Bang Theory. So if you're going to question who created God, who created the energy that at the beginning of the Big Bang Theory, and it's actually a small portion of it, a small bit of energy that then exploded and expanded very quickly. Where'd that energy come from? So I'm not talking about the show, by the way, just so we don't get confused. So both of them have the same question that they both struggle to answer with. Even in the philosophical terms, going back to the beginning, people they're kind of thinking, well, maybe it could have been God, maybe it was that unanswerable place that we call God. Personally, I am on the belief that God created the universe. That the book of Genesis does start to lay out a great deal for us that we've been arguing about, that we can continue to argue about, but I want to move past. Not get stuck in there because there's more to it than that. But that the book of Genesis is starting to lay out for us the example that there is truth that comes, that is revealed within the Scriptures. The next argument is a teleological argument or intelligent design, that we see in our world how intricate our world fits together, that there is a need of one thing coming together. And I am sitting on a hill. I'm not complaining, I'm not insinuating to be someone as great as Darwin, but I'm sitting on a hill and I'm looking at the simplest of things, a bee, buzzing around. And without this bee, and thankfully it didn't sting me that time, but without this bee that is spreading pollen and helping to bring life and pollinate so many different things that I can't even imagine, that each piece fits together and is dependent on each other, that there must be intelligence behind our whole design. A number of years ago, I was sitting in church, and the pastor at the time, he was the youth pastor, and he got up and he was leading the rest of the service. But he gives a diagram of what it means, or what all the different processes that need to happen in our bodies to create a scat. There's about 100 different processes, and if one's not working properly, you could bleed to death. So there's all these things working together in our bodies that are important, that seem to work together so well that if they didn't, we wouldn't be here. And ourselves working together, whether it's in our families or in the rest of our communities or in this whole world, that there's so much that depends on something else, that it looks like there is a design. that there is someone behind creating and putting everything together, that there must be an intelligent being out there that has made all this happen. Well, the argument to that is, or the problem with that, no matter how improbable the universe could have just happened. And the probability is so grand. One sort of word picture that was brought up is that it's kind of like, it's a possibility, but highly unlikely, that a hurricane can assemble a 747. Now, when we think of hurricanes and all the wind and the force that's going through it, we usually think of them tearing apart. Another word picture, and this is a little more common, is putting a group of monkeys on typewriters in a room, and eventually they will come up with a best-selling novel or one of Shakespeare's plays. It's unlikely. It's highly, highly, highly improbable. But people think, well, maybe, this may. Another sort of picture of it is from a movie when there's this guy and this girl, and she says there's like almost no chance that this is going to work out. And so he keeps challenging her. So, like, what do you mean by almost no chance? Like 99.999% that this is not going to happen. So you say there is still a chance, there's at least there's like 0.000.1 chance. There's all of these things going together. It is improbable. But they still say, well, it's still semi-possible. The problem I have is that essentially then everything is an accident. That the deeper point of our lives are based on accidents. That we start to take away a greater meaning of who we are. But there's still a problem. People still have a problem with the creative or intelligent design. What really got me was the question, and it's something that I alluded to a number of months ago in an example from Timothy Keller. The example is that there's this woman watching a frog, watching a bug, sitting on the frog. This is where usually, a few minutes, you're going to go, ooh, because it's like, eh. And the bug lands on the frog, sticks its beak into the brain, or to the head of the frog, and sucks out the brain. I warned you. And the woman's watching this. This is completely natural, but she is disgusted by it. And she starts thinking that either there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with nature. So the question then that actually came up when I'm studying for this message series is the question of how do we know evil? What is evil? And of course I took a number of years ago called Evil and Suffering. There's two examples along the same line, that there are people out there that would say that the Holocaust never happened. One of the most evil events in our recent history. But they say, no, it never happened. What proved to be? The other question that came up, which I found actually more disturbing, they admitted it happened. But how can we call it evil? Now, some of the things that we see in our world, we have labeled as evil. And yet, some of these same things that we see in our world that humans do in the animal kingdom, animals kill for the fun of it. Some animals even kill their own kind. Yet we don't call it evil, we call it natural. Yet when humans do it, we call it evil. The whole idea of the concept of good and evil
question of, is something good or is something evil? I believe that there is evil in this world. I also believe that there is a lot of good in this world. And I believe that God is bringing a lot of good in this world. But when we start to see things that are evil and we start to call it good, or even question, how can we believe that something like this is not evil? And yet, at the deepest root of who I am, I know that it is. Where did that knowledge of good and evil come from? Because if we're going from an argument of natural law, what is the difference between the animal kingdom? People have used this. It happens in animals, so why can't humans do it? This very prevalent argument these days, and yet if we're going to actually start going down this road, we have to ask this question that is foundational for our society, and even of justice. The question of, where does justice come from? If justice is just a gathering of like-minded individuals, then justice is very subjective, because those like-minded individuals will change. These are questions that seem separate from, how do we know that God exists? But they are, I believe, part of the struggle that we face when we look at the arguments of, how do we know that God exists? Then there's the question of the Bible. The Bible is a book, we call it God's Word. It describes how God has revealed Himself in our world. And yet, people will argue that you can't use the Bible to prove God, because it becomes a circular argument that it's God's Word proving that God existed. So we struggle with that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. Hold on with me in a few minutes. We're going to get to the point where it all ties together. I'm just giving you the problems that people face when you're using all these arguments. That people keep knocking down one argument, but I believe we have to look at all the evidence, all the proof that is out there. The other thing that comes up is personal experience. How have we personally experienced God's presence in our lives? I love hearing stories of testimonies of God showing up, Christ showing up in people's lives, and yet people will struggle with that one, because others will argue, well, that's subjective. What's the proof? They have trouble arguing against it, because that is each of our personal experience. The problem that I see with it is that it becomes very much a point of personal truth, not an overarching absolute truth that I believe is present in our world, that people struggle with too. Now the interesting thing is, when we get down to it, we come to the Scriptures. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 20, the second part of it, highlights something very interesting. And I believe it is key in our world that we struggle to see God's presence. And here he's saying that He will, your teacher will not hide himself anymore, but your eyes shall see your teacher. That we'll be able to see God, that God is going to be revealing Himself. One of the problems that we have with being able to see God is our sin. Calvin has the idea of total depravity, that sin makes it impossible to turn to God. That the sin in our lives, the sin in this world, makes it impossible for us to turn to God. That it is God's action working through us, through the Holy Spirit, that makes it possible for us to even have the choice to choose God. So the sin that's blocking our way of being able to see God, and it is God who is revealing Himself and is making it possible to reveal Himself through the Holy Spirit. But when we put all the evidence together, even though people will strike it down, say, well, this argument doesn't work, this argument doesn't work, this argument doesn't work, but you bring all the evidence together, you start to prove a case for the existence of God. That you start to see that God is present in this world. Karl Barth, another theologian, he wrote a light, I use the term light very loosely. It's a group of books, a number of volumes called The Church God Matters. But Karl Barth was a philosopher in the 20th century. Actually, theologian, sorry, in the 20th century. And one of his main things was that you can't experience God except through Christ, if I understand that correctly. And the Bible itself says this, that Jesus himself, these are the words coming from Jesus himself, that no one has seen the Father except for the one that came from the Father. And he's saying this to his disciples and to Thomas, who we know as someone who doubts, who struggles, who even might have asked this question. And yet he's saying, you have seen him now. You've also seen him because of me. So you see, as we start looking at Jesus, and we start focusing in at Christ, Christ who the world looks at, there's people in the world that looks at Christ, people like him as a good teacher, said nice things, good thing to follow. And yet some people start struggling when they say, well, he didn't claim to be God. If you read the language that was written there, that he spoke, there is evidence when he starts using the I am statements, when he starts talking about Son of God, Son of Man. These are all evidences actually that he's claiming to be God. And we have evidence, outside evidence, of Christ's existence, Christ's life, that we start to see that the Scriptures are starting to paint a picture that is actually, that we can look at and see that there is a lot of truth, not just truth, but also fact. There have been doubts on whether the Scriptures can be trusted because there are groups of people that have disappeared from history, and yet archaeology is starting to find their civilization and say, well, maybe we were wrong. But the Bible is actually right on these people all along. We struggle in a world that is seeking great wisdom, great facts, great proof. In the Bible, Paul even writes, you know what, this is a question that's been going on for ages. The wisdom of this world will struggle with the cross of Christ, with the cross of Christ that was, the cross itself was a punishment for political rebels. The cross itself was a deterrent in trying to keep people in line. The cross itself was a horrible punishment, and yet Christians see the cross as a great symbol of freedom. That the wisdom of following Christ to the world, and the world's, if you look back at Christ's biography, they saw him as just a carpenter. Isn't this Joseph's son? Isn't this just a fellow from Nazareth or Galilee? What good comes from that? And yet, Jesus didn't just claim to be a good teacher, a moral person. He also claimed to be God incarnate, to save us from our sins, reconciling us to God, showing us the deep and important love of God. We can see this in the Scriptures, but also outside the Scriptures in history. We can see it even in the arguments that bring them all together are present. Hearing the stories of people experiencing Christ in their lives and how their lives have changed. All the evidence coming together, I believe, proves
the existence of God. And there will still be people who doubt. But I think it goes back to the question. I mean, there's the arguments that comes through science. Can you prove it? The flip question is that, can you not prove it? Or can you prove that it doesn't exist? Excuse me. But if you look at science itself, everybody remember the 4 elements way back when? Fire, wind, water, I believe it was wood. Everyone remember every single one on the periodic table now that is elements? There's a few of them. Science keeps moving what is the smallest particle known to people. It keeps changing. Just because science itself is struggling to prove something, it may be actually the part of the problems that science hasn't gotten or hasn't caught up to God. We keep forgetting that there are multiple ways of looking at the same question. Very much like the question we looked at last week. Why does a good God allow evil and suffering in the world? And the question, when we reframe it, is why does a loving God allow suffering and evil in this world? Sometimes we need to ask the question differently. Sometimes we need to wrestle with these elements of faith. Because you see, either side of this argument needs a great deal of faith, whether it is faith in God or faith in the unlikely probabilities of things happening. But you see, when we start to examine how we know that God exists, we start to see the greater truth of our lives and the deeper meaning of who we are as people. Not just as creatures in creation, but as people who have been and who are loved by our Heavenly Father. We are not created just by accident, but with intention and purpose. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, help us to go beyond our own wisdom. Help us to be able to see you in this world, in our lives. Help us to see the truth of your presence throughout our whole lives, from the beginning, through the blessings, through the struggles, even into that time where we die from this world and are born again with you. Where we're born into eternity. That great and wonderful time with you, where our faith becomes sight, where our questions fade away, and your truth shines as clear as day. Lord, help us to be able to see. Help us to be able to trust. And help us to live by the faith that you have given us, that you